Hello, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis. We're back with the Saturday live stream. Sorry, I was a few seconds late. Still had to get a few pieces of equipment set up, but we do have a discussion. We're going to focus on 3 brands today, but not about new releases. Instead, I have chosen brands that are not particularly commonly encountered in the United States or discussed about. I have to limit it to the US because otherwise I will probably be wrong and you'll be like, no, these brands are really, really common somewhere else, but not here. And I did see before the stream even started, when I was getting things initially set up this morning, that Dr. LK said there are loads of things Americans don't know about the rest of the world, and that's absolutely true. So today you will get to enjoy my inability to pronounce anything that is not American, and brands that I have deemed as being very rarely encountered in the U.S. I did do some research though, so most of these I think you will be in agreement are not the ones that we usually talk about. I would say I have covered all of these brands. Maybe. I cannot remember if I've ever actually discussed the German brand, but I've taken one from each country, major watch manufacturing country. So Switzerland, Germany, and Japan to run with a brand or a model line, or because I guess, again, it somewhat depends on how you think of it. That'll be the case with the Japanese choice. But that are not generally found in the United States. Not that you can't get them, but either they're limited numbers. Other brands get more attention. They're marketed in a market that isn't in the United States, so we just don't tend to encounter them very much. And that, of course, has an impact on the viability of people wanting to actually go ahead and own them. But housekeeping, no pre-recorded videos since last week. Been pretty busy working, and I have family stuff planned this later today. Working on doing a pinball project over the last couple of weeks. Still continuing to do that. On the wrist today is my Parmigiani Fluie Tonda PF. I think I wore this about a week ago. I don't remember last time I wore it on stream though. But anyway, it's I'm going to say my one integrated sports watch that I have. I probably have another one that's kind of integrated-esque that I'm not thinking of right now, but this is the one I consider the integrated sports watch. So let's go ahead and let's get started. I want to start with the Swiss brand because I think this one's going to be the one that's most well-known. It's definitely the one I believe I have talked about in terms of new releases the most, and that would be Angelus or Angelus. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to mess up a lot of pronunciations today. I always call it Angelus, though. So you're probably familiar with Angelus because they have been at Watches and Wonders. They were at Watches and Wonders this year. It's a brand that has gotten a lot of attention, mostly for their revival watches, which is generally what resonates with me. However, they don't really have a lot in the way of collections. Very modest, kind of. I think this is one of those resuscitated brands, or at least that's the categorization I place it in. But their watchmaking has gotten a decent amount of attention. I can't say a lot of attention because I personally don't know anyone who owns an Angelus watch. I haven't looked too aggressively at them myself, but the thing that stands out to me that I know them for is a lot of chronograph work. Now, that's part of the reason I have not dove very deeply into them. Is as a general rule, I try and avoid chronographs. They're more expensive to service. I don't use the complication very much. Historically, I did. My first nice watch was a quartz Citizen chronograph. And I used that chronograph function a lot to time things like when I would need to basically track billable hours, so to speak. So historically, I did have one that I used a lot. I don't use my Zenith very much for its chronograph function, and that is currently the only chronograph I have in the collection. However, Angelus, I think, is a very interesting brand. They have kind of 3 flavors here in terms of generalized lineups that they've got going for them. So the Chronodate is what I kind of think of as their more modern take on chronograph watches, where you see materials, rubber straps, titanium casework. They have, obviously there's certain exceptions there. Not my personal style. You see the cropped hour markers. So of course that's going to be something that does not personally visually appeal very much to me. However, their watch movements in and of themselves are also very, very interesting. Let me see if I can get some zoom in here for you. So you could see like, you've got customized rotor work with the Angelus A. Again, very modern sort of looking watch. However, what's always caught my attention with this brand is their fabric. I think it's their Fabrique line is what it's called. Now, for whatever reason, this will not back out, so I have to I'll have to click and just go like this. But so yeah, the La Fabrique, obviously we got some tourbillon work. So they do high-end stuff. And all three of the brands I tried to run with today are ones that I would classify in the luxury space, or at least they have watches in the luxury space. Because if we want to talk about watches we don't encounter very often, we got slews of micro brands that you're not going to run into in the US or anywhere else, just because the production numbers are small. There's so many of them. There's so many competitive options at various price points. So I wanted to try and limit it a little bit. I try not to go too small, though, on the independent side, because you can run into the same thing. You go on the independents and you end up seeing a whole lot of really expensive watches because they make less than 100 a year. And it's kind of like, well, no one's ever going to encounter those either because there's just so few of them. So I tried to find a middle ground, more around like the size of Moser on up, but under 10,000 units a year. Not sure if I successfully did or not, but hey, you guys can always suggest things in the comments if you are watching the recording. If you're watching live and you have brands in mind that you think of that are just less encountered, you don't have to restrict yourself to the US. I just had to do that because as a simple American, I got to think from my own perspective, and that is what I am able to find in the United States. La Fabrique, the telemetries in particular are my favorites, and we see all sorts of different versions of these coming along. Fairly simple looking ones. We've got even the chronographs, though. This is the closest I have come to wanting another chronograph. Like Breitling somewhat tempted me, but it's Angelus where I see like this style of watch, very very vintage. Follows all of my rules of marker design and everything. Extremely classical, but monopusher chronograph, very interesting complication. Not a complication I've personally ever owned. So again, this is a brand that's operating, I think, at a very high level. Have they clicked yet in the US? I say no. But of the three we're going to talk about today, I think they've done the best about getting attention. But beautiful movement work. They're operating in a luxury space, but without it, they're not like up in that Vacheron Patek pricing scheme either. At least not new in box, so to speak. That's more of a pinball term, but so given that, they're relatively competitive for what they are. When we see I don't know, they've got the pricing here on the site, but if you ever gone and looked at some of the articles when the new pieces come out, like a lot of the stuff is under 20,000. Again, very expensive. But when you think about the level of horology put into the pieces, I think that Angelus is one of those that does deserve to perform better than what we see out of the brand, at least here stateside. Now, they've just got a lot of interesting stuff. Not all of it works for me personally. Apparently, I'd have to sign into Instagram to let you go through all that. But anyway, link to every brand is in the video description, so you could go ahead and explore. But again, I think Angelus is the one that even if you're not super familiar with them, you probably have heard of that brand at least. They have been getting good press. So, I think they're making the right moves. Maybe it would be smarter if they did more of a Mont Blanc and had a bit cheaper watches to kind of bait people in, and then have their other stuff that they've got, like the monopushers and stuff. Like, again, Mont Blanc has Mont Blanc, and then they have Minerva branded Mont Blanc, which like their high end stuff. I kind of view Angelus in the same way, except they don't have that entry level path. At least I don't view it that way. They might, but it might behoove them to go ahead and do it because, again, yeah, they're doing stuff like tourbillons and such, and I think things like that are tough for people to want to buy at high-end prices if you're not already familiar with the brand. So like their chrono dates, though, and the La Fabrique line, I think are pretty interesting. And there's an ability for people to start to latch onto it. But again, at least here, United States, not a brand that people are wearing. I don't know if it's more common elsewhere or not. Can't speak for them. Let me get caught up with the chat, and we will move on to brand number 2 after that. Kevin, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Thomas with the Escapement Show. Hello. Hope things are well. I actually started watching. I was not up when your live stream tends to start at 5 a.m. my time. So I was not. Sometimes I'm up. I was not today, so I slept through it. However, I started to watch back on the recording. I would recommend people go check it out today because he actually has a wristwatch show. I guess you noted ID Guy used to do that. I wasn't familiar with. I know ID Guy's channel. Who doesn't? But I didn't know he used to do like wristwatch, wrist shot. I can speak. I promise. Wrist shot live streams. So anyway, I just thought it was really interesting because I saw a whole bunch of dials already that I'm not familiar with, like vintage Seikos and stuff that I just haven't seen before. So it was a really cool opportunity to just get some that visual stuff. I know Tim Masso does wrist shots with his Monday show, but usually you see like, I think it's 16 watches a week if you watch it. And they also tend to be the same general brands usually as well. So anyway, good job with the stream. Well, from what I've seen so far, maybe it all fell apart at the end. I don't know. I don't want to speak too out of turn. Trap Vision, good morning. Hope things are going well for you. Dr. Kevin, hope you are doing well. Hopefully you're not performing surgery while watching this. Though this topic might be dry enough that you could safely do both. Tuna, thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Link is in the video description to support the channel that way. And good morning to you. And Oscar, good morning, Oscar. Glad you're able to make it. Trap Vision says he has not heard of this brand. Which brand are we talking about? We're still talking about Angelus. He has not heard of Angelus. I've only seen more recently them get a lot of attention. And again, the La Fabrique line, mostly I've seen their chronomats as well, though. But again, when I hear their name, I do actually think of something at this point, and that is always vintage inspired mono pusher chronographs, because this line, the line you see on the screen, is the one that I'm most familiar with, but I've never handled one, and I don't know anyone who owns them. But maybe someone who's watching it does own it. If so, please say in the chat. It would be good to hear about. Tuna says, Angelus, I think they're pretty much a niche brand all over. My hope has been I've taken niche brands in all three instances, though the last one probably is, it's not as niche once we get to Japan. But anyway, yes, it's a good point. Benton, welcome to live stream. What's good, everyone? Wearing my Piaget Altiplano from the 80s. I'm not familiar with the Altiplano line. I actually don't know a whole lot about Piaget other than they make some very nice looking dress watches and some very thin watches. And Ben asks, how am I liking the Patek Philippe Gondolo? I like it quite a bit. I'm not wearing it today. Today is, I did not want to use a brand that I don't own any of. I want to only use brands that I've never owned. So I'm wearing Parmigiani Fleurier Tonda PF Micro Rotor. Parmigiani could have been in this list. I think it's better known, though, than any of the three I've picked. And since I actually own two Parmigianis, I wanted to talk about stuff I have not handled. Because otherwise it feels like cheap. But anyway, Gondola was not in the list to be in on today's list because Patek is not an obscure brand, even though it is a fairly pricey brand. Ben notes, Angelus is nice, but I feel the price is a bit pricey. I do like the mono pushers. That's where I think Angelus's biggest problem is. As nice as these are, and they are, I think, well priced positioned for the complication. Given the brand name recognition, I think they're in a little bit of on the struggle bus, as I like to say, because it's like they don't have, like, they may be priced under like a chrono from Vacheron or AP. Great, but it's not, but they're above a Breitling, and like, are they going to be above a Universal Genève? Probably. And I don't think it's necessarily an unfair price, but they don't have the name recognition. Parmigiani is a great example. Parmigiani has some of my favorite watches. I would say Parmigiani might be overall my favorite Swiss brand in terms of like how many pieces in the catalog do I like. I don't know. Them and Vacheron are pretty close. But the struggle with Parmigiani is that name isn't there. Like, you release the Toric and it looks awesome and it's $45,000 and you're like, why would you like? I'm all for buying it used. Don't get me wrong, because that thing's going to take a bath secondhand. But just like this did. But it's like, I get it. Your watchmaking chops are definitely there with the Trinity, but your name recognition isn't. And I think my marketing hat, which I have no training in, so my hat is a very small hat, but my little tiny marketing hat says you need to build your name up a little bit more before you start saying that's the pricing you get to command. But hey, it lets us save money on the secondhand market. And even brands that do have the recognition, like A. Lange & Söhne, by and large, you can still get very good deals on secondhand because it's just not seen in the same light, which is great if you like those brands. But we're not really here to talk about Lange or Parmigiani in this case, though Parmigiani could have fit into the discussion. Thomas says, thank you, Dennis. Show went really well. Some of your watches were featured. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Speaking of watches featured, I want to go ahead and jump to my second brand. So first one was Angelus from Switzerland. Let's go to Germany. And so I am going to do one. I mentioned featured because I know someone who watches this channel who actually posted in the Watches with Dennis Discord, which again, link in the video description. There's no cost to participate in the Discord if you want to chat about watches in a more textual format. But Dornblüth Sohn. I'm somewhat familiar with this brand, but even less so the Angelus. But there was a viewer who recently got one of these. So I actually do know someone, at least through the auspices of going through this channel, that owns these a watch from this. But this is a very interesting brand to me because they do, and I've seen this with German brands in general. Is I'm not going to call it full on bespoke necessarily, but kind of like there's a thing like kids were really, I don't know that you kids today are still into this. There used to be a thing that kids were into called Build-A-Bear, and there'd be like these places at malls, and people would go and take their kids, and they'd get to like customize a teddy bear. So Build-A-Bear. The name is on the tin. It's with Germany. I've noticed there's some tendency to be able to say, here's a baseline watch. What do you want? Like, do you want date, no date? Do you want automatic or hand? Like Stova does it, Laco does it, and Dornbluth does it. And again, apologies for my terrible pronunciations of these names. Dornbluth, though's design language is very much in the dress watch aesthetic, whereas Stova and Laco are best known for fleekers. They don't just do fleekers, but that's what they're best known for. And this follows a much more German watchmaking style with like a lot of 3/4 bridge work and sort of some of those traditional things we might think of with Glashütte Original, Langenzone, and so forth. And the thing is, the pricing on these watches actually is pretty competitive with GO's pricing. So, and I'll dive in and give you some examples in a moment, but I want to wax a little bit more on this topic in the sense that you don't have to. Their website, I wish looked a little. I wish there were more pictures showcasing, but we'll be able to see some of the watches. The thing about it is and I've been a little confused about this, is in watches, customization is, to me, again, coming from my other big hobby of pinball, surprisingly limited. Like, we have examples of what was it, the Quattreme or whatever it was called, that really cool reverso that's $1.2 million that JLC launched like at Watches and Wonders 2021 or so. I think it was 2021. And it looked awesome, but it was like they're $1.2 million. And I think they said they're going to build like 9 of them. It's like, so that's not even, it's not bespoke. It's a run. It's a limited run, but it's a run of watches. And customization in watches seems pretty unusual by and large. Whereas in pinball, again, getting a company to build you your own custom game is very rare, but people take mods, they get figurines. It's a whole cottage industry to make things, to let you change the world under glass, to make it more your personality or have it emphasize things you want to emphasize, different lighting, different signage, different figurines, all of that. It's really, really common in pinball. And in watches, I'm surprised there's not more interest in having more say in what your dial is or what your movement is or whatnot. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just, it was, to me, surprisingly different that people are very comfortable paying 6 figures, or at least brands are really comfortable asking 6 figures for things that are not customized. They're totally standardized, and there are multiple, iterations or runs of the same thing. Whereas in pinball, no one asks for $100,000 for a pinball machine. And if you did, it would be ground up built for you. So it's just a very, very different environment. So I find models like this where you get to have a say. I'll give you an example here. Very interesting. Let me go to their configurator to give you an example. So like this is a way. So well, I'll go back to the collections in a moment, but just to give you a taste of it. I'm not just highlighting this because this is a feature. When I went to this site, because I was pulling up lists of brands that we just don't see very much in the US, and German brands in general are not super encountered. I'd say Laco is probably the one you would run into the most. And amongst collectors, maybe Zen. So you could be like, all right, well, no, I want one of these Quintus watches. And so you choose the model way. So here we go. I'll do this 99.1, a very inspirational name. So it's a 42 millimeter watch. All right, what do I want for the strap? Black, white stream? No, let's do brown with a white seam. So we'll do that. Do we want it in stainless steel? No, we want to spend a lot of money. So we'll do yellow gold. Okay, so now it's a yellow gold watch. What about the dial? All right, currently it's a sterling silver, but what if we want some sort of engraved brass dial? So now there's a little bit more texture. Or maybe we want to do some sort of ceramic so we can make it black. So we'll do that. What if I don't want the heat blued hands? What if I want loomed hands? There you go. We have loomed hands. So you see, like, that sort of thing I think is very, very interesting, but that's not why I picked this brand. I picked it because I think you get a lot of really traditional dial choices, well, with quite a bit of mix up though. So So they've got like a moon phase style watch, which has the cropped Arabic. So it wouldn't be my cup of tea. 3/4 bridge, though, you can see here in terms of the movement that it happens to come with. But again, there are different flavors of this if you want it. For someone like me, I'd be much more into going with something like the small seconds that they've got, maybe the central seconds, or this is pretty interesting, a central seconds with this massive power reserve down at the 6 o'clock position. I have really strong, almost Flieger-like Arabic numerals available there. This is a 42 millimeter watch, but it doesn't have to be. We could get it in 38.5 millimeters instead. And then you have like these very nice, very nicely finished movements. But and the example that I saw with one of the channel viewers who shared some imagery was he got his movement had like a lot more engraved work. Like there was a lot like on the bridging, not just on the balance cock sorts of stuff. So again, this is one of those German brands that plays into the 3/4 plate, the dress watch style. You do have these available in stainless steel. That is a gripe that I know people have with all Langenzonen. Everything, they have steel watches when you move up into the sports watch line. But if you're not moving up into that, if you want a Lange 1 in steel, you can't have it. So you end up looking at GO, even though maybe you want the robustness of steel or you don't want to pay as much for the precious metal. So it's that sort of thing. These watches, in terms of they have this distribution or series of where you can go ahead and you can request a price list. But I think some of the distribution channels online actually, like Watch Buys, will let you see what we mean with some of this in the way of pricing. So this is a $12,000 watch, for example. So it's right there with GO in terms of being competitive. And you have a lot more choice in what you get. I'm not saying it's better than GO. I'm just saying, like, depending on what you might want, this might visually interest you more than GO does. I think Glashütte Original, or GO, is one of the best buys that there is in terms of watchmaking hours. There was someone who did an analysis of this. I think it was around 2022 or so. But they looked at the average watch. I don't remember how they calculated. There was a methodology, so I don't want to say too many things that are incorrect. But they did an examination and essentially tried to determine the number of watchmaker hours spent on an average or a typical watch from the brand, and then looked at the pricing of the watch to determine the amount of money you were paying per watchmaker hour. GO is one of the best bang for buck at new pricing, and you can get GOs less used. So GO is one of the best at the time, was one of the best bargains for getting like visual watchmaking. As but you get a display case back, you want to see the effort that they put in. It's a really good option to explore. I think Dornbluth may be there as well. I don't know secondhand. They're going to be harder to find, but they're new, and so the pricing might not be as competitive as GO's used pricing. But in terms of getting something quasi bespoke at the very least from the company, they're right there in terms of how much it might end up costing. So anyway, it's just one of those options that I wanted to go ahead and point out. But there are other German brands as well that I think are, I'm opening a rabbit hole to some degree, because I actually looked at several other German brands. I just thought this one with the variety, again, going and showing you their kind of collection categories, you still have basically the same numeral structure on all of these, would probably be the biggest gripe. But if you like that strong Arabic numeral dial, and I know plenty of people that hate Roman numerals, for example, this is a good option to go ahead, I think, to entertain. But there are a lot of other German brands, just like there are a lot of independent Swiss brands. There are some German brands that are going to fall on that really smaller production side that will do a lot of this stuff that might get you more impressive. We could do a whole thing on German watches. And German watches, I mentioned Parmigiani earlier as a Swiss brand, is probably one of my overall favorite brands. German design, like the whole 3/4 plate and how the dials are usually done, overall is probably my favorite approach. I like the German, not Bauhaus. Bauhaus is an exception, but a lot of what I see out of the German brands, from Flieger designs to their dress watches, I just inherently seem to really favor. But that's a personal bias, of course. Tuna says, Dornbluth do some beautiful work, but for an incredible finish, check out Garrick watches. I can't imagine that many make it to the USA. That is an interesting point. And actually, I don't think I looked at them last night when I was building this out. However, I personally have explored Garrick watches before, and definitely could have been one that would make the list. In fact, you heard my my mechanical keyboard clacking away because I wanted to go ahead and put them up here really quickly. I had to find the website, but they've got some really interesting movement stuff going on too. Now, the price wise, I believe Garrick is quite a bit more than Dornbluth. But I'm not positive. It's been a while. They do a lot of they have deadbeats and they've got they've got all sorts of stuff. But and some of the variety, like if you want to, Dornbluth has a regulator, you can get a regulator from Garrick. No, this actually isn't too bad. 7,500 pounds for this, and I wanted to show you the movements because that's actually one of the parts I remember the most about looking at their brand. Again, you get that 3/4 plate look, which I really like. The 3/4. I don't buy a watch over the movement as a general rule, but I really do like the 3/4 plate look. And so Garrick, I think, does a pretty nice job. A very different finishing too. Like we're not doing the whole just regular striped Glashütte striped German silver like ALS is known for. Or the striping is what Geo would be, but this is much more of a frosted look, which reminds me almost of what Chopek would do out of Switzerland. So anyway, thank you for mentioning Garrick watches, Tuna, because it is there's a German rabbit hole that you can fall down, and there are some, I think, some pretty impressive pieces if you can get behind the designs, and that varies because the German look is different. I'd say my general description to it is German design can be very elaborate, but it's almost more clinical. And I feel like there's more of an emphasis on balance than Swiss brands, which again, we're painting with a really broad brush, can come across as maybe more romantic, a little more flourished in the way they do things rather than, again, like I like the Longo one. It's an asymmetrical dial, but they did so many iterations to make sure that was perfectly balanced for the golden ratio. Like the math was more important than anything else about the watch. Most Swiss brands don't do that. It'd be more like, Breguet, let's emphasize the flourish of the guilloche patterns and have all these different styles and patterns. And again, you can get that. Garrick will give you that, for example, give you guilloche, but it's just different. It's just a different approach. So anyway, so that was my second one. It was out of Germany. And for the third one, now this one, surely this one's more common in Japan, but these are not sold widely in the United States. In fact, I'm not sure there's an official dealer in the US. There probably is. There probably are a couple. But it's owned by one of the biggest brands in the world, being Seiko. And of course, obviously, this has to be Credor. So Credor, this is of the three we've talked about, and Angelus and Dornbluth. Credor is the one I actually have been looking at myself the most. And the reason is that this is a tough nut to crack in terms of understanding exactly where they fall in the price ladder. It's kind of like how Seiko today is. It's like when you see Seiko today, you're like, all right, well, we've got the Seiko 5s, a number of which can still be found for around $100 on Amazon, new. And then you've got like King Seiko and some of the 8 series movement Seikos that are within $1,000 of getting into Grand Seiko. And then, of course, there's a decent price range with Grand Seiko, but no one would argue Grand Seiko starts at anything under luxury. It starts at luxury, even with their most affordable, air quoting, quartz watches. Credor has occupied a massive spectrum if you consider the catalog as a whole across its entire history. There are on Chrono 24 plenty of highly affordable quartz-driven Credor watches that can be had probably, I'd have to look again, definitely under $2,000. I think there are a number that you can find under $1,000. So again, if this brand interests you, it's definitely a place you can go and look. Go look at Chrono 24, which again, it's not possible to get Credor watches, especially used. We can readily import them. But a lot of them, the thing about Credor is it's made for the Japanese market. There's generally, as far as I understand, there's not really any marketing outside of Japan for Credor watches. It's not how the company has positioned itself. They generally use Japanese design philosophies. That is not always true. The Locomotive, of course, which is one of my least favorite watches, and from a design standpoint, this watch does not work for me. But this is a Genta design, and so they have done. They do funky stuff though. So if you're into funky, look at this. You've got a 4 o'clock crown. You've got the weird bezel shape, which is not Royal Oak, and it's not a Nautilus. It's own thing. I guess it's supposed to look like the front of a train. I'm not really sure. Very interesting though. So I mean, while it's not for me, I fully acknowledge that this is an incredibly interesting watch. And that's what they've done with a lot of things. My understanding is one of the big change ups with Credor is with Grand Seiko, they have to follow the grammar of design. Like there are rules at Grand Seiko. And so there are certain aspects related. A lot of that grammar of design is really related to legibility. Credor does not have to play by that set of rules. And so while you do have plenty of very, very legible watches, you can see on this very, very zoomed out website for Credor, which is not, this is probably the worst website of the three I'm showing you today. You also do end up with things like this, skeletonization that might not be the easiest style to read. They've done some very artistic stuff. The website's also, I feel, a bit misleading because when you look at the website, you basically currently only see three things: the locomotive, the gold feathers, which are their mechanical thin watches, and then the masterpiece collection, which are all the Ichis. And if you know Credor, you probably know the Ichi watches because they're the ones that are like 40,000 US dollars, spring drive driven, porcelain dials. And they're great. I mean, they're very attractive watches, very clean dress watch styles. But there's other stuff that they've got that's not showing on their site. Like, let's say you like the Ichi, for example, but you don't want to pay and get 40,000, 35,000, whatever the price is, but you like that dial design. You want a porcelain dial. They have that. There's a line called the Kunan collection that just came out, I think, in 2023. I think there's one here's an Ichi for $40,000 on Chrono 24. I want you to let me give you a quick look at it so you see it again. I want you to keep it in mind, is why I showed it to you, because I know when I looked earlier today that the Kuan line was also available. Here you go. Here's a Kuan. It's very, very similar. Porcelain dial. This is not a great photo. Porcelain dial, though, spring drive movement, hand wind only. Here's a picture of the hand wind only spring drive that they use. And that's under $10,000. You can find these online under $10,000. I won't say all day because there aren't all that many that show up, but there are a number of them. Plus, there's a whole lot of other, just again, you look at their current website, it's all, other than possibly the skeletonized gold feathers, this is all pretty traditional looking, right? I mean, the locomotive's the locomotive. But it looks Genta. You can see Genta in it. Everything else looks very mundane. I like it because it's dress watch aesthetic, which me and boring watch design. But there is some really weird stuff that Credor has done in its past. And my search here that I did ahead of time was just everything 36 millimeters and above. Because if you get into their quartz stuff, and they've got other shapes, they got all sorts of weird things that are going on. But I mean, look, you've got this chronograph that on its surface would remind me of something that you might have seen out of Breitling or out of just regular Seiko, but it's a Credor branded chronograph. You've got locomotives. You've got weirdly positioned power reserves. My rule about cropped Arabic numerals with like subdials going in and cropping out Arabic or Roman numerals for that matter. But then I see something like this. And this I find interesting. So, like, maybe there's an exception. Isn't there always an exception that proves the rule? Look at this. It's weird. You've got this power reserve all the way up here between the 10 and 11 o'clock position. You have a 2, an even bigger 4, and a 7 that I think might be smaller than the 2, but I'm not entirely sure. Quasi-cropped, I'd say cropped off of the edge, but on purpose, like not looking like something just came in and did it. It's more looking like, well, if anything, that the bezel came in and cropped it out. This one is one of their spring drives, one of their manual wind spring drive watches. It's very curious. And so much about what they do. And again, some of these are older and not currently in production. A lot of these in this case, but brown dials with this, really basic, handsets and stuff. I don't know if this is a mechanical or a quartz. I'd have to look. It's really, really thin. So I'm going to suspect this might be a quartz watch. I'm wrong. It's a manual wind. Okay. Close case back is one of the older ones, but so you've got all sorts of stuff here, and you see the pricings all over the board, like $1,000 watches. Here's one for $400, $6,000, $40,000. So price wise, they're all across the spectrum, but they got to do their own design. Like they don't have to play by the same rules that Grand Seiko has to play by. So you can, if you're into avant-garde, there's some really funky stuff here. And I just think it's such a, as I look at it more, I like it more. Maybe that's the way I put it. I probably would never buy this particular watch, for example, but what a fascinating idea with like this, the pointer power reserve. Okay, not all that unusual. A pointer day of the week where you see all of the days and it's like it's a retrograde. Why would you do that? It's weird, but I get it because the way they balanced it's actually a really well balanced watch. Super strong. I'm not even sure what this crown does. The secondary crown, if that's what that's supposed to be controlling. Maybe this is an internal rotating bezel. That would be my guess. Oh, there's a fourth hand. I couldn't see it because of the. So this is a GMT. I didn't even realize this. This is a GMT watch with an internal rotating bezel. Maybe I would buy this. How much is it? It's less than $2,000. And it's an automatic movement. So it's just like Grand Seiko. You've got spring drive, you've got automatic and manual wind movements, and you've got quartz. They're all there, available to you. And again, I really restricted the search here, but if you go and add in the smaller weird shapes, I mean, they got tonneau shaped cases. They've got, it's its own brand with a whole legacy that back when Credor came out originally, my understanding is all the watches were precious metal. Has to do with the name of the watch. The name Credor had to do with that, but it's not that anymore. They do titanium. They play a lot in steel. It's not just $40,000 Ichis. You can get porcelain dials under 10 grand from them, and you can get Credors under $1,000. So I just think it's really interesting. And I have met a channel viewer actually, who I believe has a Credor, showed me their Credor. So I've seen, this is the one of the three today, Angelus, Dornbluth, and Credor. I have seen Credor before. It is a very highly produced, like there are a lot of Credor watches out there, more than the other brands we've talked about. However, you just don't encounter them for sale. So you're usually for most people, you either go to Japan and get them, or you need to go to like on Chrono and start ordering them. But there's a lot of funky stuff going on there. And if you don't like funky stuff, there's a lot of really traditional dial design, dress watch aesthetic, but it's not like anything else. And that's why the Ichis, for example, in their masterpiece collection have gotten so much attention, is because, well, the design itself is incredibly straightforward. It is different than anything else that, like, porcelain dials aren't very common at all anyway. With this type of handset and the second hand, the crescent, and all the rest of it, it's just, not to mention they do all that and they command that price or ask for that price and do spring drive with it, with just a different movement finishing and everything else. I mean, it's its own thing. So very Japanese, but it's super diverse. Unlike, we can argue Seiko is pretty diverse in and of itself, but when we think high-end Seiko, we think Grand Seiko, but there are rules to Grand Seiko that limit it. And Grand Seiko mostly has to rely on its style, textures, and approaches to stand out from one another. Clearly with Credor, the cases, the shapes, the configurations, like it seems like it was an idea factory where they were told they could just run wild with anything they want. And I respect them for that. And so of the three that I've discussed today, this is the brand that I've been exploring the most about getting. I don't know if I would order one in, or if that would be like, check out there's lots of used Credors if you get to Japan, is my understanding. So maybe it's a good idea. Like if I ever got over to Japan, it'd be like, that would be a good vacation purchase. not buying the watch on the cruise. You go out there and you'd be like, you know what, find something weird from Credor, and go wild with it. But anyway, Patrick of Pocket Watch Time, glad you could be here. I know he loves Credor. I know he loves the locomotive, unlike me. Tap, I almost called you Tap Vision. Tap 1999. Hello. Hope things are going well for you. Ben says, I met a guy a few weekends ago who had a Credor. I was impressed. Yeah, the one I looked at in person was really cool too. HP is saying hi to Patrick. I will say hi to HP though. I do see HP asked earlier if I had heard of Minase. I have. I don't know anything about them, so I'll do a quick search because I have heard the brand name, but I've not explored their website that I can recall. So let's take a quick look here. All right. So, these are interesting too. I don't want to sit here in silence and play Explore the Watch website, because I will do that. But that's not very exciting for some people. These are the square watches are what are catching my eye, because it's such a unique approach. With the, is that a sapphire, or is that just a? Oh no, I don't think it is sapphire. I think this is just, I meant like a cyclops. Excuse me. It's just they got a lot of depth in terms of how they textured all this. And some people I know don't like seeing the multiple dates in the window. I have a Parmigiani like that though. It's actually in certain designs works really well. This is some really funky stuff. That's okay. No, I wasn't familiar with this. I'll have to play around more, because it's definitely intriguing to me. I don't know what the pricing is. So that'll be part of, in terms of, and I can just look. I don't have to buy everything. But anyway, that's it I have in terms of what I have for you guys today for the live stream. So I hope you enjoyed talking about some of the more obscure brands, at least here from the US. I'm sure Credors are more commonly encountered in Japan. Dornbluth and Angelus, though, I'm thinking like most of you probably don't run into those very much. So I thought they'd be fun to discuss. If you're watching the recording and you want to suggest some other brands that you think deserve more attention, leave a link, or should I leave a comment. YouTube gets picky about links, so it might not let you leave a link. Just leave the name of the brand, though, and we can go ahead and look them up. I do go back and read all of those comments. And I have some stuff I am doing today with family, so I am going to go ahead and head out. I hope you all have a really good weekend, and I'll talk to y'all on the next stream. Take care.